Amara had always felt the world through color. Even as a little girl growing up in Atlanta, she could see the stories in shades of blue and bursts of orange, where others only saw walls. Her grandmother had taught her that every brushstroke carried a part of the soul, and Amara had taken that lesson to heart. In her small studio apartment, canvases stacked against the walls, she mixed pigments late into the night, lost in a universe she could control. The city outside was chaotic and indifferent, and sometimes she felt invisible, like her black skin rendered her presence optional. Yet here, with her hands stained and her music soft in the background, she was undeniable. Every painting was a conversation with the world she longed to inhabit, a space where her voice mattered, where her vision shaped reality. One evening, she unveiled a new series at a local gallery, pieces that captured the resilience and subtle heartbreak of black women in her community. The gallery was modest, but the turnout surprised her. Among the guests, a woman approached quietly, her eyes sharp and knowing. She studied Amara's work, then looked at her with an intensity that made Amara feel exposed. "These speak truths most people avoid," the woman said, voice low but firm. "You've captured what we live, yet seldom articulate." Amara's chest tightened. Compliments were rare, and authenticity rarer still. "I just paint what I feel," she said, unsure if she sounded worthy. The woman smiled, a gesture that carried both warmth and challenge. "Then you must share it with more than this room. There are stories that need your vision, Amara. Don't let them fade." That night, Amara walked home under the hum of streetlights, her mind alive with possibility. Maybe her art could be more than personal therapy. Maybe it could be a call to action, a beacon for those who felt invisible. She promised herself she would not shrink. She would paint, she would speak, she would be seen, and the world would have to notice. Janelle had always been the problem solver. Growing up in Detroit, she watched her mother struggle to keep the small family-owned grocery store afloat while juggling 2 jobs. It wasn't the hardships that defined Janelle, it was the determination to find solutions where others saw only walls. Her mind worked in patterns, algorithms, and ideas, and technology became her playground. By the time she was in college, she was developing apps that addressed local community issues, everything from food deserts to safety alerts. Despite her accomplishments, she often felt the weight of skepticism, the subtle assumptions that her gender and race would limit her capacity. Investors would nod politely, yet questions always lingered about whether she had what it takes. That doubt, instead of discouraging her, fueled her. She poured herself into her work, determined to create tools that could empower communities and give back to the women and men who had quietly nurtured her potential. Her latest project was an app that connected small vendors to sustainable supply chains, ensuring fair pricing and access to markets previously out of reach. She presented it at a tech incubator, and the room was full of critical eyes, some curious, some doubting. When she finished, a silence hung for a moment. Then the head of one major investment firm spoke. "This is brilliant. We haven't seen anyone approach this with such precision and empathy," he said. "We want to back you." Janelle smiled. But inside, she knew the journey wasn't about validation. It was about impact. She thought of the mothers juggling shifts, the young girls who dreamed big, the neighbors she had grown up with. All of them would benefit from what she had built. That night, she returned to her tiny apartment, the skyline of Detroit flickering through her window, and allowed herself a moment of pride. She had not only defied expectations, she had created a path for others to follow. Tanya had grown up with fire in her veins. From a young age, in New Orleans, she had seen injustice up close. Unfair arrests, the shuttered schools, the voices that went unheard. She carried that anger like a badge, but she also carried hope. Hope that change was possible, that her voice and the voices of her community could reach ears that were willing to listen. By the time she entered college, she was already organizing local campaigns, teaching young people about their rights, and demanding accountability from local leaders. Her latest mission involved the community center that was being threatened by gentrification. Developers had their eyes on the land, promising new luxury apartments, but displacing families who had lived there for generations. Tanya refused to let her neighborhood be erased. She rallied residents, coordinated petitions, organized town hall meetings, and used social media to amplify their story. Each post, each flyer, each speech carried the weight of generations that had been ignored. The fight was exhausting. There were nights she went home with bruised knuckles from protests, emails filled with threats, and her energy sapped by systemic obstacles. Yet every time she saw a young girl clutching a petition or a neighbor raising their voice alongside hers, she felt a surge of strength. She realized that leadership wasn't about being the loudest, it was about standing firm when the world tried to silence you. Eventually, the city council convened and, after days of debate, decided to preserve the community center and provide resources for local families to remain. Tanya's victory was not total. The struggle was far from over. But that night, as she walked the streets of her neighborhood, she felt the pulse of resilience, the heartbeat of a community that refused to be erased. And in that moment, Tanya knew why she could never stop fighting. Sierra had always felt music in her bones. Growing up in Charleston, the rhythms of the streets, the gospel in the churches, and the jazz drifting from old record players became her language before she could even speak fluently. By the time she hit her teens, she was composing songs that spoke to the triumphs and trials of her community, blending traditional sounds with modern beats. Music wasn't just her passion, it was her way of surviving, of telling stories that others might overlook. Despite her talent, breaking into the professional music scene was a constant struggle. Studios were skeptical, promoters underestimated her, and there were countless nights when the stage lights she dreamed of felt impossibly far away. Yet Sierra refused to compromise her voice. She wrote lyrics that were unapologetically honest, melodies that celebrated Black heritage, and beats that demanded attention. Slowly, she built a following online, fans who resonated with her authenticity and courage. Her breakthrough came when a local radio station decided to feature independent artists. The spotlight was small, but the reach was massive. People began calling her music a breath of fresh air, praising how she infused modern storytelling with cultural richness. Sierra felt validated, but she knew the work was larger than recognition. Her songs became anthems at rallies, at community events, and in living rooms where young Black girls dreamed of a life in which their voices mattered. One evening, after performing at a packed venue, Sierra stepped outside and listened to the city hum around her. She realized that the music she created was more than entertainment, it was empowerment. Every note she played, every song she shared, was a message to the world. We exist, we endure, and our stories are worth being heard. Monique had always dreamed bigger than the city around her seemed to allow. Growing up in Houston, she watched her mother run a small beauty salon, turning a tiny space into a sanctuary for the community. Monique absorbed lessons about hard work, attention to detail, and the importance of creating a space where people felt seen and valued. From a young age, she knew she wanted to build something of her own, something that could scale beyond the neighborhood and make a real impact. After college, Monique launched her first business, a skincare line designed specifically for women of color, using natural ingredients sourced locally. Early challenges were relentless. Banks hesitated to lend, suppliers underestimated her, and social media trolls questioned her knowledge. Each setback chipped at her confidence, yet Monique refused to give up. She spent nights researching, learning marketing strategies, and connecting with mentors who understood the intersection of business and cultural representation. Word began to spread as Monique stayed true to her vision. Her products not only nourished skin but also celebrated identity. Each jar carried a story, an homage to heritage and resilience. Small boutique stores began stocking her line, and local influencers shared their experiences. What had started as a one-woman operation became a movement of women supporting women, encouraging self-love and pride in heritage. Monique's proudest moment came during a conference on minority-owned businesses. Standing on stage, she looked out at hundreds of aspiring entrepreneurs and realized how far she had come. Her success was proof that determination, vision, and authenticity could defy the odds. More importantly, it was a reminder that Black women didn't have to wait for permission to claim their space. They could create it, flourish, and inspire others along the way. Aliyah had always been drawn to questions. Growing up in Baltimore, she spent long hours in the local library, captivated by books that opened worlds beyond her neighborhood. Her curiosity wasn't just academic, it was deeply personal. She wanted to understand history, culture, and the structures that shaped lives like hers. From an early age, she carried a sense of responsibility. Knowledge could be a weapon against ignorance, and education could be a ladder for change. By the time she reached college, Aliyah was known for her sharp mind and relentless work ethic. She pursued political science and sociology, determined to study the inequalities that affected marginalized communities. Professors admired her insight, classmates sought her guidance, and yet, at times, she felt the weight of being the first in her family to navigate such spaces. There were moments when she questioned if she truly belonged, but each challenge reinforced her resolve. Her research focused on systemic barriers in education and their long-term impact on Black communities. She published papers that caught the attention of national journals and presented her findings at conferences, where she often stood as the only Black woman in the room. The recognition was gratifying, but Aliyah remained motivated by the real-world implications of her work. She wanted policy to change, opportunities to open, and doors that had long been closed to swing wide for future generations. Graduation came with a mix of triumph and reflection. As she walked across the stage, Aliyah thought about the little girl who had devoured books in the library, dreaming of a life where her voice mattered. She realized that knowledge was more than personal achievement. It was a responsibility, a tool to uplift her community. With her diploma in hand and determination in her heart, Aliyah stepped into the world, ready to transform questions into action and curiosity into justice. Keisha had always loved the feeling of moving fast, of pushing her body beyond limits. Growing up in Chicago, basketball was more than a game meet, was a lifeline. The court was where she could escape the noise of the city, where her talent and effort dictated success, not prejudice or circumstance. Her mother often reminded her that discipline and heart were stronger than any obstacle, and Keisha carried that lesson into every practice, every game, every challenge. High school brought attention from scouts and colleges, but it also brought scrutiny. Coaches questioned whether a Black girl from her neighborhood could handle pressure at a national level. Teachers doubted her time management. Even teammates sometimes whispered about her attitude. Keisha took it all in stride, using every doubt as fuel. She trained harder, studied her opponents, and developed a mental toughness that became her signature. By the time she earned a scholarship to a top university, Keisha had become not just an athlete, but a role model. She mentored younger girls, showing them that talent was important. But resilience and self-belief were what truly carried you through. She faced injuries, losses, and setbacks. Yet each time she returned stronger. Her perseverance paid off when she led her team to a championship, the arena erupting in cheers as she sank the winning shot. Keisha's triumph was more than personal victory. It was proof that determination and courage could overcome bias and limitation. She knew her journey wasn't just about accolades. It was about inspiring those who came after her, showing them that boundaries were meant to be broken, and dreams, no matter how audacious, could be achieved. Nia had always understood the language of flavor. Growing up in New Orleans, she learned from her mother and grandmother that food wasn't just sustenance, it was memory, culture, and love. Every sima, every spice, and every careful chop carried stories of their ancestors, stories of resilience, migration, and joy. Nia's hands moved instinctively in the kitchen, blending tradition with innovation, honoring the past while creating something entirely new. Her first job in a local restaurant taught her discipline, patience, and the realities of the culinary world. She was often the only Black woman in the kitchen, and she faced skepticism from colleagues and supervisors. But Nia refused to be diminished. She experimented with recipes at home, curated menus that celebrated her heritage, and hosted small pop-up dinners that drew attention for their originality and depth of flavor. Eventually, she opened her own restaurant, a cozy, vibrant space that immediately became a community hub. Patrons came not only for the food but for the atmosphere, where culture, storytelling, and culinary artistry met. Nia introduced dishes that reflected her identity, dishes that sparked conversations and connected people to a history often overlooked. Every compliment, every repeat customer, and every shared story felt like validation for the sacrifices she had made. Nia knew that her kitchen was more than a workplace. It was a stage, a classroom, and a sanctuary. Through her culinary creations, she shared pride, passion, and resilience. Every plate she served was a message. Black women create, innovate, and nourish not just bodies, but souls. Imani had always found solace in words. Growing up in Oakland, she scribbled stories in the margins of her notebooks, crafting worlds where black girls like her could be heroes, explorers, and dreamers without limits. At school, her essays were praised, but often misunderstood. Teachers saw talent, but few grasped the depth of her perspective. Words, she realized, could be both shield and sword, way to protect herself while challenging a world that often overlooked her. After college, Imani faced the daunting task of breaking into the literary world. Rejections piled up, each one a quiet echo of doubt. But she refused to stop writing. She spent nights crafting short stories, essays, and poetry that celebrated identity, resilience, and the complexities of black womanhood. Gradually, her work gained attention online, drawing readers who resonated with her honesty and insight. Her breakthrough came when a small, independent publisher offered to release her first collection of short stories. Imani poured everything into it: the struggles, the joys, the quiet victories, and the heartbreaks of her community. When the book finally hit the shelves, she received letters from readers saying her words gave them courage, perspective, and hope. Imani realized that storytelling was more than self-expression. It was empowerment. Through her writing, she could preserve culture, challenge assumptions, and inspire generations of black girls to see themselves as worthy of the spotlight. Every story she wrote became a thread in a larger tapestry, one that celebrated visibility, resilience, and the unyielding power of voice. Dr. Ayana had always felt a calling to care for others. Growing up in Atlanta, she watched her mother tirelessly tend to neighbors as a nurse, often at the expense of her own rest. Ayana absorbed lessons about empathy, patience, and the importance of presence. She carried those lessons into her own journey, determined to become a physician who could heal both bodies and spirits. Medical school was grueling. Long nights of study, demanding rotations, and the constant pressure to prove herself weighed heavily on her, especially as a black woman in spaces where representation was scarce. Some colleagues doubted her capabilities, and microaggressions were a daily reality. But Ayana leaned into her resilience, remembering the faces of patients she had promised to serve, and the legacy of care modeled by her family. As a practicing physician, Ayana's approach was unique. She listened as intently as she treated, recognizing that healing often required understanding patients' experiences, fears, and cultural backgrounds. Her clinic became a safe space for those who had previously felt unseen or dismissed, and word spread quickly about her compassionate care. Patients trusted her not only with their health, but with their stories, finding solace in her unwavering presence. Ayana understood that her work extended beyond prescriptions and diagnoses. It was about nurturing hope, restoring dignity, and creating a ripple of care that reached far beyond her clinic walls. Each life she touched reaffirmed her purpose, to be more than a healer of bodies, but a guardian of spirits and a champion for those who needed to be seen and valued. Vanessa had always believed in justice. Growing up in Philadelphia, she watched her community navigate the complexities of the legal system, often facing obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Early on, she understood that knowledge of the law could be a tool to protect, empower, and challenge inequities. Her determination to become a lawyer wasn't about prestige, it was about giving a voice to those who had been silenced. Law school tested her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Professors questioned her in class more rigorously than others, and peers sometimes dismissed her ideas. But Vanessa refused to let doubt define her. She spent hours researching cases, drafting arguments, and volunteering at legal aid clinics to support underrepresented clients. Each success, no matter how small, strengthened her resolve to fight for fairness. Upon passing the bar, Vanessa began representing marginalized families in civil rights cases. Her work was not glamorous. It often involved long hours, emotional battles, and confrontations with entrenched systems of power. Yet, every case she won reinforced the reason she had chosen this path. She celebrated victories quietly but took pride in the lives changed, the injustices rectified, and the empowerment she fostered in her clients. Vanessa knew that the fight for justice was ongoing, and that being a black woman in law meant carrying both responsibility and scrutiny. But she embraced it fully. Each case was an opportunity to challenge assumptions, break barriers, and redefine what it meant to be a lawyer, a woman, and an advocate for truth. Zuri had always been fascinated by how things worked. Growing up in Oakland, she spent hours dismantling gadgets in her bedroom, curious about their inner mechanisms. Her family encouraged her creativity, though they worried she might never fit in conventional roles. Zuri didn't care. She saw possibilities where others saw only ordinary objects, and she dreamed of creating innovations that could change lives. Her breakthrough came in college, where she developed a device that simplified access to clean water in underserved communities. It wasn't easy. Skeptics doubted her abilities, funding was scarce, and the technical hurdles seemed endless. But Zuri's determination never wavered. She spent countless nights in the lab, testing prototypes, recalibrating, and learning from every failure. Each setback was a lesson, each small success a step toward her goal. Eventually, her invention gained recognition, drawing attention from humanitarian organizations and investors alike. Zuri remained committed to ensuring her technology remained accessible and affordable, prioritizing impact over profit. Her work inspired young black girls who saw her as proof that curiosity, intelligence, and persistence could break barriers. Through her innovation, Zuri realized that invention was not just about machines, it was about vision, empowerment, and transforming communities. Every problem she solved, every solution she crafted, was a testament to the creativity and resilience that defined her identity as a black woman shaping the future. Layla had grown up in Detroit, surrounded by murals and street art that told stories her textbooks never did. She learned early that art could provoke thought, inspire change, and give voice to those silenced by society. With every spray of paint and every brushstroke, she aimed to challenge narratives, reclaim spaces, and celebrate the beauty and strength of black women. Her latest project was a series of murals depicting black women leaders, activists, and everyday heroes from her city. Layla worked tirelessly, often through the night, sketching, painting, and coordinating with community members. Some neighbors were skeptical, others supportive, but she remained focused on her mission. Each mural became more than just art. It was a conversation starter, a call to reflection, and a celebration of heritage and resilience. City officials took notice, both positive and critical. Some tried to impose restrictions, claiming the work was too provocative. But Layla refused to back down. She held workshops for young artists, teaching them how to use art as activism, and encouraged local schools to incorporate murals into their learning spaces. Gradually, her vision transformed entire neighborhoods, turning blank walls into canvases of empowerment. Through her work, Layla realized that being an artist was more than creating beauty. It was about amplifying voices, confronting injustice, and inspiring generations. Every mural she completed was a testament to the power of art, the strength of community, and the indomitable spirit of black women who refused to be invisible. Talia had built her empire from scratch. Growing up in Memphis, she had seen the struggles of single mothers, friends who dropped out of school, and neighborhoods where opportunities were scarce. She vowed to create something that not only provided for herself, but also lifted others along the way. Her first venture was a tech startup focused on connecting young black professionals with mentorship and career resources. The path was challenging. Investors doubted her experience, competitors underestimated her, and societal expectations often felt like barriers. Yet Talia thrived on challenges, treating each setback as a lesson. She hosted workshops, developed online platforms, and personally mentored dozens of young women eager to follow in her footsteps. Her office became a hub of inspiration, where ambition met guidance, and where each success story reinforced her mission. Talia's influence extended beyond business. She spoke at conferences, participated in community initiatives, and championed programs that encouraged entrepreneurship among underrepresented groups. Every life she touched was a ripple of empowerment, showing young women that it was possible to dream bigger and achieve more than they ever imagined. Looking back on her journey, Talia realized that true success wasn't measured solely by wealth or accolades, but by impact. The lives she empowered, the doors she helped open, and the confidence she instilled in young Black women were her greatest accomplishments. Through mentorship and entrepreneurship, she had created a legacy of resilience, hope, and opportunity. Kendra had always carried a sense of purpose. Growing up in Baltimore, she witnessed communities struggling under systemic neglect. Yet she also saw incredible strength, creativity, and resilience. Determined to make a difference, she pursued public service, believing that leadership was not about titles or power, but about responsibility and impact. Every decision, every initiative, was guided by a commitment to justice, equity, and empowerment. Her rise to prominence wasn't easy. As a Black woman in leadership, she faced scrutiny at every level. Critics questioned her competence, doubted her intentions, and tried to undermine her progress. But Kendra leaned into her principles, listening to the people she served and ensuring that every voice mattered. She implemented programs that addressed education gaps, supported minority-owned businesses, and created safe spaces for youth to explore their potential. Kendra's greatest strength lay in her ability to inspire. She mentored emerging leaders, amplified community voices, and reminded everyone around her that leadership was about service, not ego. Her initiatives brought tangible change. Neighborhoods revived, schools supported, opportunities expanded, but the true impact was intangible. Hope rekindled in hearts that had grown weary of waiting. As she reflected on her journey, Kendra realized that her path was part of a larger continuum. The women who came before her had broken barriers, and the ones she empowered would continue the work long after her. She smiled, knowing that the legacy of Black women was not only resilience, but the relentless pursuit of progress, creativity, and empowerment. Leadership, she understood, was the ultimate act of love and responsibility, and she had embraced it fully.